was just crying, like crying out of nowhere. There wasn't really a reason for crying. As a person who was in the public eye, I feel like people think that you can't have mental health problems. Like, oh, you know, they only see what you put out on social media. I think really no one really noticed how I was not doing very well. Then when I was 17, I moved to Paris for modelling. I entered a competition, I won the competition, and I became a full-time model. In the beginning it was just to pay for university, but then I just never went back to school. And I stayed modelling, travelled the world, moved to New York. The thing that I do find hard in modelling is the loneliness. People don't realise that there's a lot of travelling, there's a lot of being on your own. I think as a young teen especially, and doing that, it's really hard because you don't have family members with you or anything. The last 2 years, especially in COVID, I kind of became a big mental health advocate for the personal things that happen in my family, and then just really want to put the message out there and break the stigma around mental health. For 10 years, my sister has been self-harming, depression and suicidal. So I've kind of lived with her since she was 13 and like gone through the emotions of a family member and dealing with that. And then in 2019 she came to me on Christmas evening, on the Christmas day, and she told me that she was going to kill herself and that she had a plan and that she had the note, and that when I left the next day she was going to do it. So I didn't really know what to do, and at the time it's hard because you don't really understand what the person's going through. So all my family was like, oh no, you know, she won't do it, it'll be fine, it'll be fine. I'm like, oh, I don't know. But my gut was telling me that this time she was going to do it. So the next day I called the hospital. They told me that I needed to call an ambulance, and an ambulance came, got her, and then about 9 p.m. the same night, we checked her into mental health hospital. And she was there for 6 weeks. And now she's doing really good. Like they really helped her. I think for her it was that last resort, and I think it also scared her. She came out and she's doing really good now. She's studying, she's got a full-time job, she has kids, like, yeah. And then last year my uncle killed himself. He died of suicide. So that was a whole, of course, emotional toll too, and the family, and just trying to understand why he did it, and that kind of thing. I've actually not spoken about this public yet, but I will a little bit now. I actually went through a really bad depressive time 6 weeks ago. I realised I was at high functioning depression, and I ended up calling a helpline, and they thought that I maybe had PTSD from actually my sister when the whole mental health thing in the hospital happened. So the last 6 weeks I've been dealing with this and getting help and seeing a therapist. So that, on top of also being alone in a city in New York and not having anyone around you, can have like a really detrimental effect on your mental health. I didn't really see it coming because I'm always alone anyway, but I would like stay in the house on my own. I would watch like crazy amounts of series, but at the time I didn't really notice it because I was also training for the London half marathon, so I had to go and exercise. But then I was realising I was running and I was just crying, like crying out of nowhere. There wasn't really a reason for crying. As a person who was in the public eye, I feel like people think that you can't have mental health problems. Like, oh, you know, they only see what you put out on social media, which is also can be very negative. I was like doing selfies to make myself feel good. I think really no one really noticed how I was not doing very well. And then I had a moment. And I was like, okay, I think I really need to get help. I was stood actually on the side of the road and things were not going well and my thoughts were not good. So I just called a helpline in New York City, and they were really good, and they just said, you know, I think you have PTSD, I think, you know, you just need to surround yourself with people, you need to talk to someone. I had a therapist anyway. But also, you know, when people say to you, oh, some depressive people don't talk about it, they don't say how they're feeling, they don't realise it. That was me. I think I was high functioning depression. I was just doing life and I go on autopilot. Now that I've been through that and understood where she was in her head and how you act as a person when you have depression, it kind of really made me want to do more as well for mental health, because I think people have such a stigma on it and they don't understand. Like, I've met so many people who have said, well, she's happy there, but now she's sad. And it doesn't work like that. You know, you're not you. I wasn't Alexina. When I went through that moment of my life, it was like I was somebody totally different. reach out to a family member, friend, or even a text line. Like if you're not feeling like you've got hope, if you're feeling sad, like just to speak to somebody. And then it's just like knowing the signs. I know that can be really hard because I didn't notice it on myself. But like if you're just staying in all the time, or if you don't want to see anybody, like if friends are saying let's go out and you don't want to go out, and it's really hard to push yourself, but if you can just push yourself that little bit, just to even go and have a tea with somebody, it just really helps the mood and elevate you. And yeah, just connect with someone, anyone. It can be a stranger on the street even, you know, just reach out to someone and tell them how you're feeling.